Well, hi, community group leaders and teachers. We're continuing our teaching series this Sunday on Prayer Makes a Difference. And this week we're in week 3, May 19th, and you're going to be teaching on Psalm 42. Psalm 42 is a pretty well-known psalm, a lot because of how it starts. A beautiful analogy of us panting for God the way a deer pants for water. But the subject of Psalm 42 and 43 is actually spiritual depression. We see the psalmist who is wrestling with a great amount of despair. He's suffered at the hands of his enemies. He's being ridiculed by them, and it's caused him to sink into despair. Now, most of us at some time or another go through seasons of despair. I think it'd be a great thing to talk about in your community groups. If anyone is walking through a season kind of dryness or despair or darkness, and just kind of be open with each other, talk about that experience. Most people will tell you if they've walked through depression, one of the last places a lot of times they want to go is to church. And the reason is because sometimes it feels like at church we have to put on a happy face. Everyone's expected to be doing well and to be smiling. And so for someone walking through a season like this, the church can be a really hard place sometimes. Matter of fact, the psalmist mentions that. He remembers back to the time where he used to lead the procession with joy. And I can imagine now it's very difficult for him to think about getting back into the procession to go to worship. But in this psalm, in Psalm 42, we see someone going through depression, yes, going through despair, but not going through it alone and not letting that despair define them. As a Christian, even though God promises us joy and peace, our lives are constantly changing. And so we're going to sometimes walk through seasons of darkness. God doesn't promise that we won't. But what he does promise is that he will be with us. And this psalmist, all the way through the process, is laying hold of God's promise to be with him. He's wrestling for that reclaimed joy in God. And that's what we have to do when we walk through these seasons. Counselors will tell you that it's important in those seasons to not let yourself live defined by your despair or your depression. And that's exactly what the psalmist works against. He refuses to let his feelings define him. Instead, he listens and reminds himself and speaks to himself about what he knows to be true about God and about his word. So this week, I just want to encourage you to make your community groups a safe place for anyone to talk about either a present or a past season in which they've walked through depression. And then in this psalm, you're going to see 5 different ways in the pastor's cut that the psalmist actually goes through his depression with God instead of forgetting God because of his pain. So I hope it's a wonderful week. I hope this is a week that God really ministers to people in your groups that have in the past or are presently walking through a season of darkness. Thanks. We're so thankful for you and all that you do. Have a wonderful week.